basically it's me saying we're back, baby, with another episode of Midweek with Max. And as usual, I'm joined by Hemi co-founder Maxwell Sanchez and our head of Marcoms, Phil Batman Gomes. And it's 2025. That's stuck. That's stuck. That's carrying over.
Okay.
That's carrying over into the new year. That's the thing.
Okay. Obrigado, Hadu. I think I have you to credit and blame for that. But anyway, go ahead.
That is all Hadu's fault, and also thank you, Hadu. But yeah, without I mean, we got a lot of stuff on deck, so we can just roll right into it. So Max, turning the floor over to you.
Cool, sounds good. Happy Christmas and holidays and New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2025, and yeah, let's go through some quick updates on the Hemi side. So we've obviously holidays, so people have been in and out and stuff shifting around, but we've made a lot of progress on towards mainnet stability. And so we've been doing a lot of work on the RPC backend side. We've Optimism has something called Proxy D, which is basically a smart RPC router that can run a bunch of downstream nodes and then automatically route different requests based on what the type of request is. So really expensive ones like a get logs query can route to different nodes. And then it also maintains a downstream consensus group. So it could basically say, hey, we got 10 RPC nodes and 8 of them are on the latest block and 2 of them are a block or 2 behind. And so we're only going to route requests to the current, all the downstream nodes that are on the current tip. And so it does a lot of cool things around reliability and letting us scale out RPC in a reliable fashion versus just putting, running a bunch of nodes and putting them behind a Nginx load balancer or something where you could send a couple of subsequent requests and they get routed to different nodes that see slightly different network state because blocks take time to propagate. And so we're working on getting that set up. So that'll give us some additional nice scale on the Geth RPC, both the direct HTTP post requests and also the WebSocket endpoints. So looking forward to getting that activated soon on testnet. And then what else? I think I already gave this update a while ago, but it's hard to remember where exactly we were with the last Midweek with Max update. We've done a lot of work with auditors, so we did a bunch of smart contract auditing with 2 different firms on the Bitcoin tunnel side. And so we've gone through another revision of that with them with some other improvements there. And then we also did a code and infrastructure audit with HackerOne. And so all that's come back and is looking good. And what else? We also deployed, I believe this has already been done for probably 2 Midweek with Maxes now, but we deployed a network upgrade that added in some new HVM endpoints and new precompiles in the EVM, and also came with a new Bitcoin kit version. And so that's been running well on testnet since about, I think, December 9th, 10th is around when we did the upgrade. So that's been looking good. And we had initially some rockiness with the Bitcoin testnet 3 difficulty bomb, where basically, for anyone who's not familiar with it, Bitcoin's testnet 3 network has an issue that was originally added because they assumed not everyone's going to be mining testnet all the time, so there may be times where nobody mines a block for a long period of time, and so people were allowed to basically create a 1 difficulty block, a super easy block to mine if there wasn't a block on the network for 20 minutes. But there's an exploit there where Bitcoin basically always checks the previous block for the difficulty, and so if 2 of those got mined in a row, then the entire network would reset to difficulty 1, and then people could mine tens of thousands of blocks a day. And so when we first launched the testnet update, there was some issues dealing with that high amount of load on the HVM indexer, but that's been fixed and everything's keeping up with the testnet 3 difficulty bombs we've seen since. So that's all looking good. And it's a good trial by fire for some of this stuff because it's way more adversarial than we'll see in mainnet, where things are smooth and there's never 70,000 blocks in a day, stuff like that. So it's probably a little bit of over optimization to make it work great for that edge case when it's not something we'll see in mainnet, but either way, that's in and looking good. And as far as mainnet launch, I'm sure we'll get questions on that. We are looking to do it imminently, and so not giving an exact date because we're still working on, there's a lot of open pieces still with partner onboarding. With the tech side, we want to get the RPCs scaled out first, so those are fully performant and can handle any amount of load we get at mainnet. And so still some open work streams, both on the engineering side and the business partner onboarding side. But we are looking to do it imminently. So, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The current target is before the end of January. So we'll see exactly where that lands, but that's what we're currently working towards. And we also did a bunch of work on the Block Scout Explorer, which we're going to be pushing to the production testnet Explorer soon. So for anyone who had issues with verifying certain types of smart contracts that were created using internal transactions, there was some weirdness with the older Block Scout version that we were using. And so we've caught that up to Master will be deploying that soon. It also comes with the UI facelift, which is a lot easier to navigate and also lets people write to smart contracts with a connected MetaMask or Brave Wallet or whatever, which is pretty cool and will help people out. Anyone who's doing actual development work on testnet and trying to test stuff. And I think that's about everything. So why don't we kick it over to questions?
Sounds good. Before we do, Phil, is there anything from the Marcoms team that you want to share?
Yeah, let me take Space's host prerogative before we get to the question and answer piece. Let's talk about how we ended 2024. And so this is going to be a marketing update, but also kind of a lightweight PD update. We announced, I think the number is 28 partnerships since the testnet launch. So that means, testnet launches in July. We started making announcements in mid-August, and we've been making announcements at a clip of about 1 to every 3.5 working days. And we're now in the first full week of 2025, and we've already got 2 announcements out the door with SatLayer and B Squared, and we're working on 2 or 3 more right now. So if there's a data center smoking somewhere in the world, it probably belongs to Telegram. And the chief reason why it's melting down is that we are that's where crypto lives. That's where crypto marketing and business development lives, and we are absolutely burning that up. So really proud of the business development team led by Mr. Taylor Click. So follow him, Crypto Sooners on Twitter. And again, we're starting the year out strong. Followers of Twitter might have also noticed that Matthew Rozak, one of our, certainly the co-founder of Block, who spun off that sort of thing, is going to be speaking at the WAGMI conference the week of the 20th in Miami. So if any of you happen to be there, just kind of ping me. We'll see if we can make it happen. But he's going to be speaking there, and of course talking about all the good stuff that we're doing here as a bunch of Hemigos and Hemigos. Also on the media front, it was really, really nice to round out 2024 with an interview between Jeff Garzik and Frank Chaparro of Block. So Frank Chaparro is the editor at large over there. He, among other duties, hosts the podcast The Scoop. And it's one of Jeff's best interviews yet. So if you've been following his interviews, he's been on Bitcoin Takeover, he's been on the Roll Up. I think I counted the other day, he's been on we've gotten him on 5-6 podcasts, Wolf of All Streets, the Bitcoin Telegraph Agenda podcast, Untangling 3. I mentioned Bitcoin Takeover, Bad Crypto. So we've been putting our founders out there quite a bit. But yeah, absolutely the latest one, The Scoop with Frank Chaparro. Please check that out. You'll find it on our Twitter. Share it with your friends, etc. We've got another podcast coming out very, very soon in the first half of this month. not going to say who it is yet, but we are really looking forward to that. Another piece of the marketing mix that doesn't often get talked about, but this group here has some exposure to, is the notion of research reports. So there are firms out there that deliver research on crypto. You may have seen the report that the good folks at DeFi Llama Research put out was the end of last year. It's free to download. In fact, I'm told by the people over there it's one of the most, if not the most, downloaded paper that they've put up for DeFi Llama Research. So check that out. Maybe a lot of it isn't news for anybody who's been following us for a long time, but it is great to see all that news and analysis in the same place. So we're targeting for the end of this month. Another report's going to be coming out from good folks over at Reflexivity Research, and we've got a very aggressive research agenda there as well. Everything else the marketing team is working on is in service of two things. One is the mainnet launch, corralling all of the partners that we have, KOLs, et cetera, making sure that they know what we're up to and how to participate. So that's number one. Number two, equally important, is supporting our business development efforts. So the way we approach our partners, both current and in progress, is that we want to be an extension of their marketing team. And one of the things that I used to talk about in the early days of Hemi is what I like to call Gooby, good out of box experience. Every time I mention it, it's become a drinking game internally at Hemi. So no matter what time zone you're in, go ahead, have a drink on me. But part of that good out of box experience is letting partners know that we consider ourselves an extension of their marketing as well. And so that at least has gone some way towards giving us a lot of support from partners with whom we've been incredibly grateful. So that's the update from my end. Everybody here is head down, ears back, getting us ready for me. So with that, back to you, Greg.
Thank you for that, Phil. All right, so why don't we just knock out the when section right out of the gate? Let's just kill that. All right.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so rapid fire. I know we covered it, but what the hell, right? That way, if we want to make a segment out of it. All right, when mainnet?
Soon, hopefully by the end of the month.
I love that for us. When faucet?
The faucet, so with mainnet coming soon, testnet incentives are going to be spinning down obviously in place for mainnet. So hoping to do something with the faucet. It's been a continual albatross, but also it's kind of a short-lived thing if we do get it fixed and up and working. So hopefully soon, no update on it, but also even if we do get it fixed now, within a couple of weeks, it'll probably be deprecated for a mainnet points program. So just throwing that out there. And also on that note, also I was going to throw this into the main kickoff, and I forgot to. We will be posting the pop mining points to Absinthe very soon, as in like next couple of days. And we'll also have so in Absinthe, it'll just be a lump sum amount of points that you've gotten for pop mining up to the state. But if you go to the pop testnet tunnel, not right now, but once we do the final points, you'll see a full accounting of how you actually got to that points number, the full breakdown, what transactions you got paid for, or at least what activity per day you got paid for, and kind of an audit report. And as a reminder, since I know we've discussed this in previous episodes, but it is something that I think it's good to reiterate just so people understand the mechanics. The way we're going to do the testnet points for the pop mining is going to be based on how you compared to the herd of other sort of regular users. And so you'll get the lion's share of points if you're able to, for each specific day, if you're able to do roughly the same number of pop transactions as the majority of other users on the network were able to do. And so that uh, people who were running custom infrastructure, running their own BFG node and modifying the pop miner to be able to send a transaction every keystone, even when we were having infrastructure issues and whatnot, those people will get a little bit of additional points for that effort that they put in. But people will get the majority of points if they performed in line with what other people that day were able to do. And so it should give people who were trying to pop mine and were running into the infrastructure issues as we were scaling out. I mean, at maximum, I think we had nearly 200,000 web active simultaneous WebSocket connections. So it was interesting to scale that out. But anyone who had issues with that, you should get still the majority of points if you were able to perform in line with what other users were able to do. So we're hoping that's pretty fair. We think the mechanic makes sense, and we'll post actual details on the points breakdown when we post all the points so people can see the exact allocations. But just wanted to let people know that is coming, and we are trying to structure it so it's fair for everyone who is just running the pop miner against the regular infrastructure. And also on that note, we will be doing something extra for people who are pop mining early on. And so there will be bonuses for consistency. So if you've done pop transactions over a ton of different days, and also if you were one of the people doing pop transactions, early back in July, August, maybe September. So just wanted to throw that out there and let people know how that points mechanics is going to work.
Awesome. All right. Question. When you mentioned the thing about the absent point, would that qualify as what would be considered like a mining or point snapshot?
So if that was a community question, the snapshot is probably they're talking about when we spin down season. I forgot whether we call it season 0 or season 1, but the current testnet season, and so that'd be basically a snapshot would be the final points allocation for that entire season, and that'll
Gotcha.
happen right before mainnet launch. So exact timing TBD, but we'll probably spin down testnet points between 3 and 7 days before the mainnet points go live. And there will still be a couple tasks like some things on social, maybe pop mining or like one other thing to do on chain, but we'll spin down most of the incentives so we can do that snapshot, do a full audit. Everyone can see their final points allocation. If they think there's anything wrong with it, there's that grace period for uh, them to let us know and for us to look into it. But that's probably what they're referring to with the snapshot. The points in a informal sense, the pop thing will kind of be a snapshot because it'll be basically all the pop activity from the inception of the public testnet to now, and that'll just be a lump sum points allocation that's added in Absinthe. But my guess is they're talking about like the overall program snapshot.
Copy that. Well, in that case, you killed two wens. We have two more wens left. Do you want do you want to guess what they are, or do you want me to spell them out?
I'm guessing one of them is related to VBK, and the answer is still soon.
Love that.
And
One
there
more.
has been progress on that front, but nothing public yet. And my mind's blanking. What's the fourth one?
When airdrop slash TGE.
TBD. No new info on that.
All right, and that wraps up the when section of questioning. Okay, now on to the non-wens. First off, we have one that came in. It was actually one of the first questions we had that came in. Um, will gas on Hemi mainnet be paid in ETH or another token?
Initially, it's going to be only ETH. Once there is a Hemi token live, that'll also be supported for fee payment, and there will be a discount baked in. So the exact mechanics basically, ETH is still the native token of the net, not the native token of the network, but from a tech perspective, when you look at the network architecture, when you get the balance of an address, that is going to remain ETH for the foreseeable future. And so that's kind of the native protocol baked in gas. But we are going to do something so that people can pay fees in Hemi tokens and get that discount. We'll also eventually be letting people also pay fees in the Hemi Bitcoin, the tunneled version of Bitcoin on the network. And if you pay in Hemi tokens once that is live, you'll get a discount. And the way that'll be implemented is basically if you pay in either Ethereum or eventually HBTC, when that's enabled for fee payments, your fee payment will be converted to Hemi tokens on an on-chain DEX before it's paid out, and a fee will be charged, and the fee will either go to the DAO or get burnt or whatever makes sense. But when you pay in Hemi tokens, it's not going to go through that conversion process, and so effectively you'll be paying a lower fee because you're not paying for that token conversion into Hemi that then gets paid out to sequencers.
All right. What steps have been taken to secure the mainnet against potential attacks? I think at the beginning you briefly touched upon this, but if there's more that's possible to publicly share.
Yeah, good question. We've done a lot of stuff. So there's a couple different layers to securing a network. There's obviously the actual protocol itself, making sure there's not bugs in the protocol that can be abused for either denial of service or to steal, user funds or whatever. Most of the stuff that would affect the like protocol security side on the like EVM, the settlement to Ethereum, most of that is the well-known, well-audited Optimism functionality for the Ethereum settlement. For the Bitcoin settlement, that's our new Bitcoin tunnel system. So we've had that audited now by two different smart contract firms, and one of them did a full audit. We made some modifications, we made some updates. They've done another full audit on top of that with different people from their team, and then the other firm we did one audit of the more final version after the first audit finished with the other auditing firm. So we've been doing that. We've also done, so that's the protocol level stuff. Then there's the actual networking infrastructure. So we've done a full infrastructure audit with HackerOne. We're going to do another one before we go live with mainnet, another phase of that basically because we are still making changes as we scale at RPC. So we'll do a final re-audit on all that stuff. But basically making sure nobody can get into our nodes, making sure all the SSL TLS settings are correct, making sure everything has proper software updates. And then the third part is monitoring to make sure if something does go wrong for whatever reason, we are immediately aware of it. And so we've done a ton of work on monitoring all kinds of different parts of the protocol, from settlement behavior to cross-chain transactions that are getting sent, and being able to automatically detect if there is something wrong in that system, being able to have immediate visibility of that so we can go and fix it. So short answer, a lot of work, a lot of auditors on different parts of the stack. And and as part of that HackerOne thing, they also did a code base audit. So there's smart contract auditors who just look at the Solidity code, and that's what we've been doing with the Bitcoin tunnel system. But there's also with HackerOne, we've had people look at all the modifications we've made to the Optimism stacks, everything in OpNode, OpGeth, so on and so forth, to make sure that none of those things look like they could introduce any security issues. And the only things that they found were tiny little linter things like a UNT32 to UNT64 conversion that wasn't properly checked and on a certain architecture could lead to an error being thrown in some RPC method. So everything on the code side for the daemon audit, as expected, came back pretty uninteresting because, again, like I said, most of the modifications we made didn't really affect the actual security of the system, other than obviously POP, but that's just another layer of fork resolution and consensus security. So it doesn't really change the underlying mechanics of settlement and stuff like that.
All right, we have a couple questions that I'm just going to kind of roll into one. Regarding Deimos and human verification, will users have to do that again come mainnet, or will it carry over?
Good question. So the plan is to mint basically the token that you already minted on testnet if you've gone through the Deimos verification or the Deimos onboarding. That will be reflected over to mainnet. However, there will be a point for the actual points claim later on where you will have to re-verify. So you won't have to remint the token, but you will have to verify again that it's you when you do the final collection, which is a something that's basically needed to make sure that you are still the person who owns that address. People weren't getting random people on the street to do verification for them. It'd make it a lot harder to have to go find those random people again to do the verification. So it's a extra civil protection mechanism, and that re-verification will be required for the points season claim at some point in the future.
Awesome. Hope that answered the many questions regarding that. Um, does having two wallet addresses, two MetaMask accounts, will that get me in trouble at the end of the project when checking eligibility, I can speak, and distributing of a potential airdrop? One account is the main wallet address has been connected to Absinthe from the beginning, and the other one has been made by Web PopMiner, including Keystone's Mind.
Yep, that's perfectly fine. That's actually the setup that we recommended a lot of people do, was have a separate dedicated wallet to do the pop mining, and then that's completely divorced from your MetaMask wallet you're doing tunneling and swaps and whatever with. And so that'll be totally fine. We'll have basically a way for you to associate all of the addresses with your identity. And what we'll do is basically take the combined total of all those addresses, but then deduplicate it for what a single person is allowed to earn per day. So high level, if you had two addresses and say you imported your POP address into MetaMask at some point and did some swaps with it the same day you did the maximum number of swaps with your other wallet, those will be deduplicated, and you'll only get credited for the points that you could have earned with one address in the point system for that task in that day. So you won't be punished for it, but you won't get extra points for having done the same behavior on multiple wallets that's above the maximum that one person's allowed to earn for points for that day for that task.
All right. When the I guess I could have fit this into the when category, but it's not spelled WEN, so this is totally fine. When
WHEN.
yeah, this is a WHEN question, so completely different. So when the Hemi token comes, what will be the use case for that token?
A lot of different things. So there's going to be, like I mentioned, the Hemi token will be used as the preferred gas token of the network. There will also be a lot of uses for it in governance. So governing, protocol upgrades at some point. And none of this is, all of this is still a little bit up in the air because it's pretty far out. But we want to do a governance system for doing grants for projects to eventually transition to the community basically being able to vote on what projects get funded, either with initial upfront funding for going out and building some new application, or like retro PGF style funding. So we'll have the Hemi token there. You'll be able to stake the Hemi token and become a sequencer once we decentralize the sequencer. So it'll have an important role in network decentralization and security. And also there will be some other tokenomics mechanics for basically staking the Hemi token, being part of different systems. So like I mentioned, there's the DAO, there's the becoming a sequencer. There's also going to be stuff eventually for especially large holders to be part of the Batcher Proposer publication system, eventually the Challenger system, which we are reworking from the way Optimism does it in a way that we think economically makes a little more sense and has incentives better aligned. And so, yeah, basically you'll be able to stake it, opt into a lot of different parts of the protocol, participate in those, help secure the network, help run the network, and also pay fees. So anyone who wants to use the Hemi network for whether it be, using some on-chain cool Bitcoin wallet people build around HVM, or interacting with SushiSwap and doing some cross-chain Bitcoin to Ethereum transaction or whatever, all of that value that we're creating on the Hemi network for people to come use in the DApp ecosystem, the Hemi token will be the preferred gas token for paying the network fees to perform those activities. And there may be stuff in the future with L3s. If you want to look super far into the future, we do want to build out basically a Bitcoin secured shared sequencer system. And so the short of that is basically a DA layer that any L3 can plug into on the Hemi network and utilize, and then a shared sequencing system that gives some interoperability improvements between L3s in the Hemi ecosystem and So running that whole system could also potentially be based on staking Hemi tokens. Again, that's a really far out item, but looking further into the future, there's stuff with spinning up, securing, running L3s as well that could use the Hemi token.
All right. Happy New Year, Hemi team. What are your on-chain resolutions for 2025? What new partnerships, etc., can we expect this year?
Oh,
Oh,
tons. That's
wow, that's a
probably more of a Phil
really good
question.
question. That's a really good question. Well, we're not in the business of pre-announcing partnerships because that's not our decision to make. All I can say is that, like I said, we've continued to announce partnerships at the rate of about one every 3 working days, and that is continuing. So, yeah, I mean that's really all we can say at this point. I mean, I will say that our business development team is absolutely tireless. Sometimes when I look into their calendars to see if I can schedule a meeting with them, they've had meetings since 6 a.m. that morning, and they've got meetings at 11 p.m. that night. So if your question is what partnerships you can expect, I can't name names. If you're asking, is the current book likely to continue or accelerate? I can say hell yes, because that's certainly what it looks like to me. Um, so if that's what you mean by on-chain resolution, I think maybe we can leave it at that. But no, that's an excellent and an excellently stated question. So thank you.
All right. Well, here's three in a row that I are also excellent questions. Hey, everyone, awesome job this week with the questions. Now that the when section's out of the way, we can. This is great. With Hemi Network's focus on interoperability between Bitcoin and Ethereum, how does it ensure that users can seamlessly transact between the two blockchains, given the significant differences in their respective architectures and consensuses?
That's a really good question. There's a couple different pieces to this. So the first, and people have heard me talk about this ad nauseum, but it's good to repeat. The way HVM works is it's a developer focused Bitcoin interoperability stack, and so it's not some HVM directly is not something that end users interact with. I mean, obviously they use the EVM, and we call HVM the EVMs encompassed in that, whatever. But the Bitcoin stuff that we added to HVM, users are not going to use directly, but it gives developers the ability to build some really cool Bitcoin interoperability applications around it. And just to give an example, our Bitcoin tunnel system is entirely built around the HVM. It's kind of it's if you will, it's the first demo app of HVM that's actually will run in production basically, and it kind of showcases what cool things you can do with HVM as a developer that you can't do with a header relay system on Ethereum or one of the other Bitcoin L2s that's using that sort of interoperability system. So that's the longer term answer: is people can build really cool stuff that interacts with the Bitcoin blockchain in very native Bitcoin centric ways, adopting and being able to easily interact with and bridge the gap between Ethereum's account model and Bitcoin's UTXO model. So we'll see that as developers start building things around HVM and launching them. Some of the cool things that people could do with HVM, as far as applications a developer could come build that people could then go use. You could do on the more financial DeFi type side, you could do all kinds of cool non-custodial dexes. So being able to trade Ethereum for native Bitcoin that never leaves the Bitcoin ecosystem, it's all delivered and moved around on chain. There's all kinds of cool stuff you could do with Bitcoin-based non-custodial lending. There's a lot of neat things with being able to won't talk too much about this, and it's still a little amorphous. This is a further out item, but being able to do stuff with native Bitcoin staking in ways that other protocols could plug into. HVM also is this external observer of Bitcoin consensus, and it does so in a very anti-censorship mechanism. And so when you look at building interoperability technologies that talk to Bitcoin, Bitcoin's architecture is super limited. The UTXO table is not authenticated to the Bitcoin, headers. So if you run header-only consensus, like you do with a header relay system, you can't prove that a UTXO exists in the UTXO table and is not spent, which is important for a lot of interoperability technologies, including Bitcoin staking systems, uh, non-custodial DeFi applications, and so on. But also that HVM external observer of Bitcoin consensus. When you look at Bitcoin consensus, you can prove to somebody that there's a chain with cumulative proof of work of 100 trillion, but you can't prove that there does not exist a heavier chain out there in the ecosystem. And as the way that HVM works is basically anyone can relay Bitcoin consensus information that's publicly available to HVM's view, which lets you use that in, for example, like BitVM constructions. The current BitVM 2 proposal uses uh, basically a modified version of the superblock idea from way back in the day with IOHK's NEPA POW work. And there's some security issues with that because it is this in a vacuum view of Bitcoin consensus that uh, because of the way it has to work, it basically doesn't have access to some sort of public, censorship resistant view of what Bitcoin's current canonical chain really is. And so they had to use a super block system, and there's some various attack vectors against that, where basically miners can mine what is probably going to be the super block, the best super block for a certain period of time. They can withhold it and go do ransom attacks on operators. Operators themselves could collude with miners to do certain types of attacks. And so Hemi, being that external observer of Bitcoin consensus, gives not only us, but everyone in the Bitcoin L2 space this secure, censorship-resistant external observer Bitcoin consensus that can be used and eventually ZK proven for getting around those kind of hacks that people are currently using for Bitcoin awareness and being able to reflect current Bitcoin state information back into the Bitcoin scripting language, which is not self-aware. On Ethereum, you can run a smart contract that looks at the current block and does something based on the chain that that smart contract is executing in a transaction in a block in that particular chain. Bitcoin, you have no awareness of where script is running. It is the only context it has is the UTXO that it's spending, and obviously you can do like time lock conditions and stuff. And so to get that awareness, you have to reflect Bitcoin back to itself. And the current way people are doing that with superblock like client emulation has a lot of issues. I mean, as that external observer opens up a lot of really cool applications that people can build using that more secure, more reliable way of reflecting Bitcoin back to itself, in a sense. So that's going to be interesting to see people build around. And then from an end user perspective, uh, everything that we're doing on the Hemi network, for the most part, is centered around the MetaMask, EVM experience. And so anything you're doing on chain with tunneled Bitcoin or other Bitcoin LSTs, LRTs, wrap Bitcoin, threshold Bitcoin, whatever, that is all done as an ERC20, similar to what a lot of other Bitcoin L2s are doing, but just to give the end user experience. So from a DeFi application perspective, if you're building apps that want to use tunneled Bitcoin and tunneled Ethereum assets, they are interchangeable as ERC20s. So there's nothing special you have to do to deploy, say, a sushi swap on Hemi and support both Bitcoin and Ethereum ecosystem assets. And from an end user's perspective, once you get the Bitcoin onto the network, it is just an ERC20 like anything else that shows up in your MetaMask wallet. You can use it normally. You can put it into any protocol that accepts ERC20 tokens, so on and so forth. And the part of actually getting Bitcoin onto the Hemi network, we're trying to streamline and make that as easy as possible. So, obviously we can't. There's a lot of stuff people do in the Bitcoin world with, offline and air-gapped wallets and whatever. So the experience is usually a little heavier for Bitcoin users to move Bitcoin around. Obviously, we now have wallets like Unisat, which, if you're willing to trust a web browser with your Bitcoin and sending transactions and such, are great from a usability perspective. And so we're also working on things with how you actually get Bitcoin onto the network that support wallets like Unisat to try to make that easier for that class of users. And yeah, I hope that answers the question. It's from a developer perspective, you're always still going to have to deal with the UTXO versus Ethereum account model. There's really no way around it, but we've tried to abstract that away and make it as easy as possible with Bitcoin Kit. So as long as you as a developer understand the Bitcoin UTXO model, it makes it really easy to interact with it. And from an end user perspective, everything on chain basically feels like an Ethereum experience. The one exception being how you actually onboard and offboard Bitcoin. And for that part, we're trying to support all the usual Bitcoin wallets and infrastructure and stuff that people like to use. That'll be an ongoing process. The initial version of the Bitcoin tunnel, I believe, is only going to support Unisat, but we will be adding more wallet support there as well on the Bitcoin side. And eventually, this is a further out, we'll see how exactly we end up implementing it, but we're trying to work towards a system where, because there will be staking opportunities on Hemi for various Bitcoin assets to be able to say, stake it. And obviously the simple ones everyone's familiar with, like putting it in a lending protocol or putting it in a DEX and LPing or whatever. There will be other interesting ways to stake Bitcoin in the future. And what we're trying to do is eventually wrap that into something that from the end user perspective is basically you send Bitcoin to a wallet, everything else happens behind the scenes, and you're, based on, maybe you can choose different strategies for how that Bitcoin gets staked and whatever, but it's totally opaque to you in the sense that you don't have to go in and do this action and that action and this other thing and then move this here. You basically, hey, you want to engage in this sort of this type of Bitcoin staking with these risks and this reward. Send your Bitcoin to this address. Everything else happens behind the scenes, so that Bitcoin's automatically tunneled to the network. The tokens are moved around to the right protocols. You're given a receipt token in a wallet that you could access and do whatever you want with on the MetaMask EVM interaction side, but you're able to easily onboard from Bitcoin and kind of jump over multiple steps. So that won't be at mainnet day one, but that is something we're working on. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention. We're also, and this is again a little bit further out as well, but we're looking at some sort of a unified Bitcoin token that could be used in the ecosystem. So obviously we'll have our Hemi tunneled Bitcoin, which is native Bitcoin brought through the Hemi tunneling system to the Hemi network. But we're also trying to do a lot of things with other Bitcoin-based assets from the Ethereum ecosystem. And so that means we're going to be incentivizing liquidity around those. So if everything works as we expect, Hemi should be a great place to go and take whatever Bitcoin asset you have, whether it's threshold Bitcoin or wrapped Bitcoin or one of the LSTs or LRTs or native Bitcoin through the tunnel system, and easily trade it out for other versions with sufficient liquidity for all that, but also be able to eventually work towards this unified Bitcoin token that you can basically swap any version of Bitcoin into it. Obviously, there's different risks with different types of Bitcoin because they have different underlying custodianship mechanisms. So that needs to be managed, and that's where a lot of the work is on how to risk manage that part of the protocol. But basically creating that unified common Bitcoin token on the network that we can incentivize liquidity around, and then everything can kind of route through that. So that again is a little further out, but also a interesting work stream that's in progress.
All right. That was awesome. Thank you. Has
Great question.
that was an excellent question and really well stated too. Has the Hemi network integrated AI into its protocol? If not, does Hemi network have plans to integrate AI into its protocol? I picture this as like a bat signal for Ryan Charleston, but
Yeah, we should let him jump in on this one too. He's doing some not really on-chain AI, but he's doing some pretty cool AI stuff in the crypto space. As far as AI, we definitely have plans for different things we want to do with it. We're not doing, at least at the moment, we're not doing AI on the protocol level. We did look into there's some interesting things in the space for trying to use AI for, there are all kinds of different things for like mempool management, transaction selection, trying to use AI to automatically detect certain potential like DeFi, EVM level exploits against applications. So we have looked into some of those things. There is a potential partner we talked to who does some of that AI transaction analysis for risk management, like early attack detection against DeFi protocols. So that wouldn't be like AI for edit consensus layer. And I'll get into why that doesn't really make sense. But it'd be AI, analyzing transactions and seeing if there's certain patterns that you can expect when a protocol is going to get exploited, and so it can detect a lot of those things. So we are potentially going to work with them. So that could be interesting. We also, from a end user application level, we do want to start doing some things around, AI like on-chain smart agents, stuff of that nature. That's all EVM level stuff, and there's existing projects in the ecosystem that are doing some neat stuff there we could partner with. There's some cool stuff with Hemi specifically, its ability to read Bitcoin and Ethereum information and be able to in a Turing complete environment program around that information. And so there's some cool additional stuff that AI agents could be able to do. They could be able to take actions based on what the Bitcoin fee market looks like, or the volume of Bitcoin that's being transferred on chain, or so there's some cool stuff in there that could be interesting. I don't think that's something that we would build out as the core team, but we would definitely put out bounties and incentives for people to either bring applications that already do that and maybe hook it up to some of the Hemi specific stuff to make it more interesting, or build something new from scratch in that area. We also talked about doing, and this is obviously a little further out, but a AI optimized L3. So it'd basically be an L3 architecture where basically the opcodes in the EVM are optimized for running on-chain AI applications. So right now, if you want to do tensor operations in a smart contract for like truly on-chain AI, that is extremely expensive and pretty much impractical to do. And so we haven't gotten too far into the actual like brass nuts of how what scale of AI models you'd be able to run in this kind of system, because it is still limited by the need to run effectively in an EVM-like environment. But for lighter weight on-chain AI, that's an interesting thread we're looking at for that. Basically L3 with an EVM that natively supports the low-level computations that AI needs to perform to run inference on-chain. And then one of the things that we want to incentivize is, and this is a little further out, and we have a lot of ideas on how it should be built, but it's probably, again, not something that we as the core team would build. To be something we try to, give a blueprint to the community and say, hey, here's how this thing could work. Here's the Hemi specific features it could benefit from. Who wants to go build this and do a grant or a bounty around it. But that would be a ZK proven AI inference or AI model marketplace. So you would be able to say, people could post models and say, hey, I made a model that detects whether, pull the Silicon Valley reference, the hot dog detector, right? Or, it's a AI model for generating this new type of art or whatever. And so you could basically take any sort of model that's in a standard TensorFlow compatible format. You'd be able to authenticate it to the Hemi network, basically publish a hash of all the model's weights put into a Merkle tree, and then that would be timestamped to Bitcoin. So you'd have that additional Bitcoin audit trail, if you will, of when the model was created and what the model's weights actually are. And then there's some really cool advancements right now with what's called ZK-ML, ZK machine learning, where you can basically run inference on a model with zero knowledge proof. So you can prove that the output that the client's getting is actually the correct output from their input run through the model that they expect. And so there's all kinds of cool applications for that. Obviously, the marketplace where you could pay somebody with a proprietary black box model or an open source one, but it also works with proprietary models to run inference on a certain input, give you the result, and prove against the Hemi network and that Bitcoin audit trail that inference result is actually run with your input on that model that you expected. They're not doing some bait and switch, or if they know say it's a financial application and they know that you're running inference on something that they benefit from giving you bad data on to make you do a bad trade so they can front run it or trade against it or whatever. They could prove that you have to trust the original model to be trained correctly, but then any results you get out of it, you can trust that they were actually run on the correct model, which is interesting. It's also a little further up. There's some cool stuff with ZK uh, model training. And so, as everyone's probably familiar, the model training is the most compute heavy part of AI. Inference you can run at the edge, right? And if anyone's tried to run, 405 billion parameter model on their desktop, they probably know, there is a limit to that. But inference is generally the cheap part, and so that's much more practical to do in a ZK environment for proving the output of a model is correct. But there are also advancements in the training side, so you could actually prove, hey, this model was trained using all of this information, and it was trained in this way with this mechanism and these parameters. And so once that matures a bit more, and we're probably a couple of years away from that, but you'd be able to have a full end-to-end Bitcoin authenticated AI chain of custody, if you will. So basically prove, hey, this AI model was trained with only data that we had a license to. Here's a proof of that license. There's some cool on-chain stuff you can do around IP management and licensing as well. And so you could have that full audit trail for compliance reasons. Big companies would be interested in being able to prove that, hey, we trained our AI model with data that we correctly licensed from the correct sources. Here's proof that we trained it using just that data. Here's proof that we didn't inject garbage data to mess with results or anything. This was the resulting model. That's timestamped to Bitcoin. Now anyone can run inference against that model. Either they could run it themselves and prove the result was correct, or they could buy, inference running the compute from the model provider. That could all be validated on chain. There's cool applications for that even in like social media. So, X, for example, could timestamp their model to Hemi, and then we know, okay, this model, it's the same one that's been running for 2 years. It's authenticated to Bitcoin, and we can prove that the feed that they generated for you is, generated off the correct model. So there's some cool stuff like that we want to look into and incentivize people to start building around. But obviously, those things are a little further out, especially with the ZK model training, because the cryptography is not quite there yet to make it practical for anything but like toy models, but it is rapidly progressing. So I think it's a cool use case of Hemi. It benefits from the Bitcoin auditability, and that can be combined with on-chain agents that can benefit from the access to Bitcoin and Ethereum assets and the ability to trade assets from both of those ecosystems in a very liquid environment that supports both ecosystems natively. So a lot of cool stuff. A lot of it's going to be EVM level. And I did mention we're not doing any sort of AI thing at the consensus layer. The trying to do that's basically just a can of worms. There's been a couple different teams that tried to do, AI for like fork resolution to try to automatically detect the most popular or the most well-known one is one that did with IoT devices in kind of like I'm not sure if they were using Hyperledger or something else, but it was a native consensus protocol that tried to use AI to predict attacks and change consensus settings based on observed behavior. And the issues of that is with an AI model, it's such a black box, you really can't reliably know what it's going to do in weird edge cases. And so it's just basically asking people to figure out edge cases with your model and try to exploit them to get it to, lower consensus parameters or accept a block as final when it shouldn't because of this, that, and the other garbage training data that got put into it or whatever. So not doing any AI at the consensus layer. That is a very dangerous thing to do. But there's a lot of cool EVM level applications that can benefit from the Bitcoin auditability, the access to assets from both ecosystems that we think will be pretty interesting. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but
That was a hell of a tangent, but it was a good one. Thank you. Um, we're at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have time for one more question, or should we call it here?
yeah, I can stick around for another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Tying back to something you mentioned earlier, you talk about DAO and governance, but can you tell me if you've already thought about the governance model? Will it be a DAO based on the one wallet or one person, one vote model? Or will the number of votes depend on the amount of Hemi tokens held? Very curious about this point in particular.
Good question. We haven't finalized DAO mechanics, but I think largely it'll be based around token holdings. So they're having Demos on the network, it gives us the ability to do some cool one person, one vote stuff. So there could be some stuff in governance for, say for example, like, and I'm not saying we're going to do this, but just spitballing ideas. Some stuff like what projects get funded, or giving out like a retro PGF grant to the crowd favorite or something. Things like that could make sense for a one person, one vote model, because it's, what is the community like? What are they interacting with? Even if a protocol isn't getting, the highest TVL numbers or the most, trading volume or whatever, if it's something that a lot of people are benefiting from as part of the ecosystem, and maybe it's a lot of the smaller participants in the ecosystem, things like that can make sense again for that, one person, one vote model. Governance for, approving like a protocol upgrade, stuff like that wouldn't really make sense to do one person, one vote. You want the incentives aligned so that the people voting on, whether we upgrade to, I'm trying to think of an example, like maybe the way that we decentralize the sequencer, if that was a governance vote, you don't want a bunch of people with very little or no stake in the network basically voting in a bad idea. You want people who are very economically aligned with the network, and so that's why generally stuff that affects the whole protocol, you want that to be based on people's actual economic stake in the network, and that could potentially be beyond just the Hemi token. But I think the most of the governance will be largely centered around the Hemi token. But yeah, for some of the more community things, project funding, stuff like that, that could make more sense to do one person, one vote. There are still some issues with doing that because it's easier to, for somebody to, get malicious funding in the sense of like they're trying to get a protocol funded that the actual community doesn't really want. They can go out and cheaply pay people to go and like individual unique users, but again, who aren't really part of the ecosystem. So it may be a combination of, unique humanity and also a certain threshold of activity to qualify for voting on, retro PGF funding or something like that. So definitely still up in the air. We are looking at cool ways we can use Deimos and interesting things we can do knowing we have unique humans on the network. But again, from the incentives perspective, you don't want to give, some important protocol upgrade right to people who aren't economically aligned with the outcome of that decision.
All right. And final question. I apologize to everyone if we didn't get everything addressed. There were a lot of questions this week, which is awesome. We'll be sure to try to carry them over to next week's session. But just to wrap things up, will we have more Hemi NFTs?
That's a good question. I don't know what the actual plans, like I know we're going to do a migration basically of the testnet NFTs people already have to mainnet. We also did have I'm not sure if we announced this yet, so I'll keep it light, and Rick, you can chime in if this is something we announced, but we're going to do a NFT around people who participated in open season for the basically end of the tunneling. Yeah, Rick, do you want to jump in on that?
Well, we have not announced that yet, but
If
surprise!
not, okay. Surprise. So there will be. Sorry about that. um,
It's totally fine, Max.
oh man. So okay, surprise. There will be that. As far as stuff in mainnet, we will definitely be doing stuff with partners around, NFT marketplaces. This one I know is not announced or even closed and finalized, so I will be very vague on this one. But there's some interesting NFT creators that some of the people on the team know, who are looking at doing something interesting on Hemi. So again, we'll see where that lands, and nothing's been finalized there yet. But there's some activity on the NFT partner side there with NFT creators. Hopefully, we'll ramp that up at some point. I will say NFTs are not the bread and butter of Hemi, at least initially. It's going to be the first couple months of mainnet are going to be largely focused around, at least from like the partnerships we're doing and the things we're incentivizing and whatnot, will be largely around, DeFi protocols, stuff that you're using Ethereum and Bitcoin assets in staking, trading, lending, borrowing, so on and so forth. But obviously, NFTs are a lot of fun. It's a cool way for people to engage in the network in a less financially tied way, which for a lot of people is interesting. And there is some cool stuff with Bitcoin auditability, Bitcoin timestamping that could apply to NFTs in interesting ways. We did the original Hemi NFTs. We did they're basically finality aware, so they evolved as they're minting basically achieve Bitcoin finality, which is kind of a cool, it's not a practical thing where the NFTs now, I mean, obviously it's more secure against a reorg, but it's all on chain, so it doesn't really matter, but it's cool, and it's a neat way to expose some of the security concepts. So there could be some extensions of those ideas that play into new NFT projects. But yeah, high level, definitely stuff we'll do. I'm not sure what NFTs, if any, we'll be doing as a team on mainnet beyond the testnet NFTs, moving them over and maybe doing something fun with the existing NFTs. So yeah, I don't know, Phil, if you have any other thoughts to add to that.
Haven't we said enough, man?
When we accidentally announced stuff.
I'm just busting your chops, man. Don't worry.
Oh man.
Yeah, the only other thing is that we do have something cooking up around gaming. Actually, trying to see if it's possible to have like security aware gaming assets, sort of thing. So stay tuned on that. We're in early discussions on what that might look like.
So to answer
that also reminds me on the AI front, one other thing to mention is one of the kind of sister projects of Hemi, if you will, Loomer, and they're doing a lot of interesting stuff with AI training, AI data routing, working with Morpheus. So we're looking at interesting ways that could plug in. So nothing finalized there yet, but that's also another interesting AI thread. So sorry, back to you, Rick.
Oh, no problem. But yeah, to answer your NFT question, that's a big yes. So
yeah.
Whoops. All right. Well, we are 8 past the hour, so we do have to wrap it up. I just want to thank everyone for attending this week, and we really hope to see you next week. As always, going to give a quick shout out to our peeps on the ground. Anubis, Aji, Alex, Avi, Creator, Foxstar, Funky, Hadu, Koki, Lyco, No Tears, and Yahoos. Thank you all, and the intern who asked if he could go to Miami, but the answer is no, because we need you on Twitter. And I'll turn it over to Phil and Max for final thoughts, but thank you all. We'll see you in Discord.